So, what happens when ruptures go unaddressed in the parent child relationship? How can unresolved tensions affect a child's emotional development and the long term bond that typically you see between a parent and child?
So, um, several things to be said about that question. The there's most generally speaking, there's the development of insecurity or fear in relationships. Okay, so there are some studies. These are terrifying. Okay, to like talk about, but there are studies that show that the quality of a child's relationship with their primary caregiver at 18 months ends up predicting the quality of their
Mhm.
relationship with a romantic partner at age 21.
Wow.
Okay. So this matters. No
Yeah.
pressure, but this matters. And so, really and truly, when we are interacting with our kids in these early formative years, we are co-creating within them a template through which they will interpret relationships moving forward. They will
Hmm.
interpret what's happening in relationships through that template, and then they will respond through that template as well. So if if anger has no place, if anger means danger to the relationship, if anger means I'm put on the outside, then that's going to develop within me a very particular template to navigate relationships when anger shows up later. And what meaningful relationship isn't at some point going to have some anger thrown in the mix, right?
Hmm.
So, so just kind of very generally speaking, long term fears and insecurities in relationships, but that will then splinter off into a couple of things that are important. One is maladaptive coping strategies because they're going to figure out children. Let me say it this way: children intuitively know that they are dependent on their caregivers for their survival. So if mommy or daddy is mad at me, and I think that means they could put me out, and kids don't even have words for it, but they
Hmm.
feel it.
Yeah.
Right.
If if that's what I believe, I at some point early in my toddler, early childhood years, I'm going to start developing coping mechanisms to protect myself from that.
Hmm.
Avoidance, hypervigilance, that fawn response, like, disappearing, whatever it is. So, and then the last thing that I would mention in terms of what happens is shame. And shame, chronic, chronic shame is one of, I think, the most pervasive problems in our society today. Shame, and this is coming from a developmental neurobiological perspective. Shame is what a child feels at the moment of the rupture when they connect it relationally in their mind. In other words, it's like first there's a spike of threat. Oh, what, this is dangerous. But then when they look at it through that relational lens of, oh my gosh, mom is mad at me. Mom doesn't like me. Daddy, is yelling at me or whatever it is. Then there's this collapse. Boom. And we see it in our kids,
Hmm.
right? Shoulders fall, head falls, tears well up. My daughter the other night, and honestly, I don't even know what did because I wasn't mad at her. I didn't think I was disciplining her in any way, but I said something and she thought she was in trouble
Hmm.
and she went into that. I saw the spike, the deer in the headlights, and then the collapse, and then the tears and the shoulders down, and her not looking up. It's not always quite that obvious. It can be very subtle. They could go take that to their rooms quietly. Here's the problem with that. They get stuck in that hypoaroused dissociative state and they don't develop the capacity literally in their nervous system. The capacity to come up out of that has to be scaffolded within them. I went to my daughter and I said, "Hey, look at me. Look at me. Come here. Let me hold you close. Relax. Look at me. You're okay. Breathe with me." And every time that happens, we're building inside of them literally the capacity for their nervous system to come up out of that dissociative collapsed state, which is what later becomes the affective background to chronic shame.
Hmm.
That was a lot,
No, that was
but
so
I think
good.
it's huge.
It is huge. Yeah, especially when you can read research articles today that show that they can witness a shame response in a child that's like 18 months old. And as a
Absolutely.
parent, I would have never thought that shame was actually being kind of programmed into them a little bit. And especially as a parent, if you can't recognize that or don't recognize it, and then also don't work to help them come out of that and build resilience for them, then it really does mess them up.
Well, if I may, let me. If I'm, can I step on some toes here? I know this is going to hit personal for some folks. It's going to, but it does for me too. I need to be open to the possibility and the probability that the moments when not every time, but the moments when I do something, when I interact with my child in such a way that that shame response comes up in them, I need to look inward and see if I was acting from a place of shame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm being disrespected. That's not okay. What does it say about me if I have a kid who acts like that? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, then what we're doing, we're essentially that's a form of scapegoating, and passing on, the traumas rather than the healing from one generation to another.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years ago, I got to have a really powerful conversation with my dad, and I think it's a story that shows the capacity we all have for growth at any age, because we were actually talking about forgiveness and him asking forgiveness of us as kids. And
Wow.
neither of us could remember a time as a kid where he had asked for my forgiveness. And he owned that in a really beautiful way. And my dad is a great man, but I think he would acknowledge that was just not the way they were taught to parent. They're Midwesterners, Scandinavian, like it's kind of that stiff upper lip. And there is kind of a sense of like, mom and dad are the authority. You do what we say. You don't question it. And so repair in our home growing up, and I got into a lot of trouble as a kid. Repair was usually, I would get in trouble, I would get spanked, I'd get sent to my room, and then repair was come out when you're ready to behave. And I would act better. And so what I internalized in that, where there was very little repair in an active way, was that it was my fault. I had done bad things, and when I behaved better, things got better. And so, I look in my own performance streak, it's like, well, yeah, that's what I learned got me acceptance and love, was to perform and be the good kid. And so I just see that impact in my life and wanted to share that in a way, again, not to fault my parents, because they were parenting. I think they loved Jesus and were doing their best, but there wasn't some of that active rupture and repair happening that left a lot of that language for me of like, oh, this is what it means for me to get love and acceptance. So I think to underscore how at any age we can address that, and how important it is that we are appropriately vulnerable with our kids and able to ask forgiveness, able to own our stuff, because of what it will do in them to communicate, oh, you're not the problem. There are times I'm the problem. There are times that I've reacted out of my, like you were saying, Jake, out of my own shame.